Some regions, most of the countryside. There is nothing even, many instances, teachers are illiterate. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. It's really a challenging thing, and also training will be time-based, and if the training is training, we want to expand it a bit. That's well. Very good. So please, you're talking about child development, child rights, situation, abuse and neglect, very, very basic. But we have to start something. And then we only hope that it will be extended and will continue. Yeah, and there is some political process. There are some other
Okay, well, good morning. Good morning. It's good to see your happy, smiling faces today. And rested, I hope. Well, we have a really, I think, a good day planned for you. And looking at training, and Beth Ann is here, and she's going to be leading in that this morning. I want to just go over a couple of things. First of all, you got off the hook last night because I forgot to give you your assignment.
Yes, because I was asking.
Yeah, you were asking about it. Well, do you know when the group that went back with us to Dayton last night, you know when they asked about it on the way back to Dayton? They knew earlier. They could have said, is there an assignment? But no.
I almost called you, you know.
You almost called me?
Just by one number.
Sarah, because I could have put it on WhatsApp, and then you know all Well, what your assignment would have been pretty simple. Would have been just to review these documents that are in your green folder, and those documents would have given you just a little bit of a heads up, looking at what Beth Ann is going to be doing today. And also, all of these documents will be on your jump drive. And then what you can do with these documents, you can brand them. You can they're in docs, you know, doc, and so that you can change them, contextualize them, whatever you want. They're all trainer documents. In addition to that, Beth Ann has just given me an incredible jump drive of documents that she's gonna go over. That'll be on your jump drive too, and I'll give you your jump drives on Friday. I'm putting a lot of stuff into those for you. So I would have only had you look through those. The assignment would have been easy, Sarah, so you would not have made everybody really mad at you. But anyway, that's okay, because we've got to go over all that today. One of the things I just want to kind of brief you on the rest of the schedule. Tomorrow, as you know, we're going to be looking very intentionally at kinship, foster, and adoption, and looking at the services that we can provide, how we can build the strengths of those who are considering foster, kinship, foster, or adoption. And so Kelly will be here and her team will be here to do that. What I also promised you that I would do, and I told Kelly that I would bring them in, I brought you copies, or a copy. This is the curriculum for pre-service.
Wow.
Yeah, you do. Karen has it and Sam has it. This is the curriculum for pre-service. There are 12 modules in pre-service, and there are 12 3-hour modules. And it's in Russian, by the way. Do you have it, Linda? Okay, and we have it in Russian. Okay, well, what I want you to do, I'm gonna put it on the back here. You can look at it. Each one of these books represents 2 modules. So there should be 6 books here, hopefully. Yeah, and they represent 6 modules. So I really want you to take a look at it. Look at the trainer guide. It's quite a lovely trainer guide. It has within the trainer guide, all the PowerPoints are listed into the trainer. This is like the trainer guide. So you go through here, and as the trainers train this and studying to prepare it, all of the PowerPoints are embedded in here. There's great instructions. It's formatted quite nicely and easy to use. So I'm going to put these on the back table so you can look at them and think about them. Because Kelly's going to be talking about them. This is kind of your homework assignment, is to spend some time looking at them sometime today or before Kelly is here. In addition to that, I told you I'd bring in trauma-informed care. Now, this isn't everything. There are 2 modules missing from this. But I wanted you to see the bulk of it, because sometimes seeing the bulk of something helps us to understand the expensiveness of what it is in terms of preparing a foster adopted family in kinship care. I mean, this is just preparing them to move into receiving a child, thinking about that. And then I gave you the fundamental competencies, and I gave you the competencies for special, or for, what did I give you? Fundamentals and related. So you have all of those competencies, and with each of those, there are other standardized training programs that are possible. I don't even have that copy. This is just pre-service. That's all it is.
And are we going to have that document?
In order to get this, what we really want to do with you, we want to train you. We want to train the trainers. This is and this is something for you to think about in your own training systems, that we shouldn't be in the business of just giving away training modules, because what happens, people will take this, it's written so that it is useful, it's usable, and people can pick it up, but they don't have the foundation of understanding the developmental sequencing. What people do, they'll pick up something, and some of you have experienced probably this, they'll pick up this, and they'll say, oh, we could add this, oh, let's put this in, or oh, I don't like this, it doesn't make sense, and don't understand why it's here. We don't put anything into a curriculum by accident. It's by intention. And it's there for a reason. If there's an activity in here, you have full permission to change the way you do the activity, but we're telling you that any curriculum that you get from us, our expectation is that you're married to the content. You're married to it, because that's the best practice. And that's how it's developmentally sequenced. It's developmentally sequenced through the levels of learning we looked at yesterday: awareness, knowledge and understanding, skill application, skill acquisition. It's sequenced intentionally for that. The activities are to help bring that. Some activities create cognitive dissonance. You all know what that is? Okay. We do that intentionally. It's intentional because it raises the question, like, for example, would be a myth. What are the myths? So it might be a questionnaire of looking at the myths, or is this true or false? That will create cognitive dissonance, because people will say, no, that's true. No, this is why it isn't. So it raises the level of potential for them to become aware of something. And when they become aware, it's like the light bulb goes off. So now they're ready to know and understand why we believe it's different. So with this, you have if you get into the habit of giving a curriculum out, somebody will take it and they'll start just manipulating it, and it'll lose its integrity. So we're asking you, anything that we give you that's standardized, be very intentional with that. If you make contextualized changes, we expect that. We expect you to change pictures, to change stories, to be more culturally relevant to your own culture. The laws that in this particular series, there are a lot of references to laws that are US. But that's great, because where you see that, take your little yellow pen, highlight it, and apply into that what's going on in your own country. We just did this training extensively in India 2 weeks ago to a group from 11 different states of India. India has 27 states, 26 states, 29 states. So almost half of India states were represented by somebody of influence within those states. And we did this within a 5-day intensive, all day and evening assignment, training of trainers, and completed all of this as a training of trainers. And we highlighted everything that needed to be contextualized as we went through it. So now what they're going to do, they're going to being translated into Hindi. We're just now working on the contract for that. It's going to be translated into Hindi, and but all of the Indian laws, guidelines, standards that are in place right now, or where there is question about those laws, are going to be included in there, because the laws are changing as we speak rapidly. You do that too. You would do that too. So the answer to your question, Sarah, is kind of a long answer, but we really highly recommend that you allow us to do training of trainers, to send somebody over to do that and to do an intensive. And this is likely, they're going in India to standardize it nationally. That's their goal, and they have the right people in place to do that. And then in addition, we just did this just a few weeks before that in Kyrgyzstan, and they're looking at standardizing it as well for Kyrgyzstan.
Can the training of trainers to do this come at any point in this journey?
Absolutely, absolutely. It can come at any point in any journey. But this is the reason tomorrow we brought kinship care, foster care, and adoption to you, because we know that's where we're sitting right now with all of you. We're sitting right there where your organizations are already doing some work in that area, or are touching those who are fostering, adopting already, or kinship care, we call it guardianship, or whatever you call it in different names. And so we really want you to be able to look at these competencies, look at what's available, and you'll make a decision. I mean, there might be others out there, but this is standardized, it's comprehensive, and we're ready to coach them. We would do an intensive 5 days training of trainers with very select, very specialized selection of those trainers who they would be. Yeah, and we've done it, and we've been successful at doing it. And then in India, we did 8 modules.
Yes.
We've gone through 8 modules. The other benefit of this, honestly, is doing it is that it gives a very thorough foundational learning of the competencies that are even in caseworker core. So the same competencies, we have, like, this stack is replicated for caseworkers, okay? So in caseworker core, for those social workers, the learnings that are there are as well represented here, not to the depth and the degree, and not with the same look and lens of things, but we see that your staff, and we found this in India, Karen and Sam, that the staff themselves said, wow, we needed this.
Yeah.
We needed this information. So anyway, I'm going to put it back there for you to look at. So this is the trauma. Some of you have done 1 module of trauma. That's this. This is TCC, by the way. That's what this is. Same thing that you're doing. Except for Alex, what Jane and I, when we created this, what's happened, this is the 3-day training for trauma-informed care. And what has happened back-to-back took and broke it down into 10 different modules. And so
Just that one is broken into 10.
they broke this into 10. Yeah. And you had that. You had that because George went through that training with them. So this is 1. So that's, if you think about it, look here. And what we know is that it's a field that's growing, and it's a field that's continuing to developing. We have to be responsive to that, to recognizing the research is continuing. So when we look at trauma, this really helps us to understand the brain, the research that's going on in the brain, what psychological trauma is, what we can do, and some great strategies that we know are absolutely evidence indicated that we can use that are really helping kids. We need it. all of you, I think all of you done that. Probably not in Brazil.
No.
Give us a call, we'll
We're building a partnership with Karen Purvis Institute right
Yes.
now.
Yes,
So we're on this way, you know, but we really need this kind of material there.
right. And we have, our team are, PBRI educators.
Mhm.
And in addition to that, like India, talked to them, they've sent, you've gone, Sam,
No.
Fourth is George Manju, ID,
Dr. Arlene.
Yeah, we-
Okay, I've gone to TBRI. And the other side of it is that we can help you get scholarships to TBRI too. So keep that in mind. We've gotten lots of people we've sent to TBRI who's helped them get scholarships. Okay, module 2, look at this. Trust-based relational interventions. And it is one strategy. Don't get hooked up on only choosing this because you're gonna miss out on many, many other competencies that are important with respect to trauma. They have a very narrow look at it. It's very good. It is not evidence-based yet.
TBRI, you mean?
TBRI, it is not evidence-based yet. The California Clearinghouse or whatever, we're looking at trauma-informed or evidence-based, has given it a high ranking. It is just one step under evidence-based. So what needs to happen there is that it needs another whole research, a whole other study that's done to really prove that it actually does what they say it's gonna do. And then it'll move up. I think it will. I don't have any question that there's enough evidence right now to show that the strategies being used are working, that I think it's definitely evidence indicated. So, okay. Do you have anything to add about evidence indicated, Maria? Okay, so, but watch TBRI. Let me also share with you that looking at evidence-based and evidence indicated, we have to be really careful because in our field, in social sciences in particular, we are a soft science, all right? And think about this. If we want to prove that doing this with a child is going to help get us this, we have to have our control group that we do this with, but we have to have another group of kids that we withhold that strategy.
Right.
So look at how unethical it's already beginning to feel. You get it?
Yeah.
So we are really in this dilemma.
And there are many multifactorial contributions to the evidence even. So that makes it so complicated. That there are so many influencing factors: the environment, the culture, the background, the traditions. So it is even if it's evidence, sometimes it's not evidence enough.
Sometimes it's better to talk about it as evidence informed, because unless you're talking about widgets, as we say, when it's humans, there are so, like you say, so many variables that could impact the results on either side of the study.
And actually, this is what makes the measurement also so complicated. Because how do you know exactly what are the contributing factors to the outcome, success or failure? Because you cannot standardize it like in a technology producing washing machines, where it's quite clear that if you put together in a proper way the different bits and pieces, then at the end you are getting a washing machine and not a fridge. But I always have this impression that we should have the same technology, but we can't because human beings and the contributing factors are much more fluid.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that, because I think that the evidence-based conversations are getting a little bit snooty. And we have to be really careful, because we really want to do things to help kids and not throw babies out with bathwater.
Don't believe in snooty.
What's that?
Change the snooty into something
Better? Another word?
Snob.
Snobbish.
Snobbish.
Yeah, snobbish. Snobbish. So anyway, module 2 is, it's module 3. Well, anyway, module 2 is sensory integration, sensory processing, and sensory processing disorder. And this is new research. And as we look at it changing continually, we always talked about 5 senses. And what's happened in sensory integration, we've added now that we talk about 7 senses. And now we've looked at, there are 2 more that have just been recently added. We're going to see more and more. So we need to be on top of it. So that's module 2. And it has a lab. There's a great lab with it. By the way, this is not an infomercial. But it sounds like one. Module 3 is helping children to learn to regulate their emotions. And as well, these go together so well. And the strategies from here are great strategies for here, but the strategies for here don't necessarily work for here. Gotcha? But there are labs in both of those. Module 4, look at this. Working with adolescents. Remember the ACE study? I've shared the ACE study with all of you. We've spent a lot of work on that ACE study. When we look at those high-risk behaviors of that trajectory, this is adolescents. Okay, and with psychological trauma. It's all about psychological trauma. Building resilience, helping kids build resilience. And then the most important module at all, and there's two I don't have here, but most important module at all is secondary traumatic stress. Taking care of yourself, which workers don't do. All right, that is secondary traumatic stress. So this is on self-care. Okay, so anyway, we're gonna put those back there. I want you to begin to look at the complexity of the work that we're doing after we've looked at what is a competency-based training system from yesterday. We need to be intentional, we need to be practical, but at the same time, we need to be able to understand competence should drive everything, all of our decisions and all that we write, all that we modify, and all that we're doing. If we're really going to be using the information that has been developed over the course of the years by experts who understand building capacity and building training systems. Okay? Now, that's my spiel this morning. Everything will go back there. I want to, yes, do you have a comment? Oh, I'm going to turn everything over to Beth Ann today. Beth Ann Rodriguez is our expert at the Institute on training. And please be informal with her and ask her lots of questions, because as we were looking at this day and looking at what could go into this day, we thought we need about 10 days.
Yeah.
It was just too much. So I really admire that Beth Ann was able to kind of modify and bring this down to doing it in a day. But please ask questions, because we want to go out of here feeling empowered. Okay. All right, thank you, Beth Ann. And you let me know if I can help you. I'm gonna just pop right down.
Sure.
These little guys back here.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm very excited to be here. I've been trying to think about how to start us off today. And, you know, I have an order of things that I want to present. I am married to the content, but not necessarily married to the process that I set before us. Because what I want to do today is I want to be open to address what your needs are. I can tell you within the parameters within which I want us to do that. I want to initially start talking a little about training systems. And a lot of what I'm going to use is going to be based on the system that we have here in Ohio. But then I'm going to challenge you to think about how what I'm talking about can be applied to your system. And what would be the challenges for your system in how you create a training system and how you develop and bring in trainers, okay? So we're gonna talk about it from the Ohio perspective, but then from you, I wanna hear your thoughts about what that means for your country and in the programs that you're working in and the systems that you're working at. My experience is I'm a social worker. I've been a social worker for over 30 years. I used to say over 25, but it got to be too many. So now we're going to over 30. All of my experience has been in the field of child welfare. I started out when I got out of college doing house parenting. I was a house parent for an emergency shelter for teenage girls. I also have done a lot of work in residential care, working with kids who are in group care. I have worked with foster families. I used to train foster families. And then also, I used to supervise and monitor foster families. And then I moved on to some more supervisor roles and administrative roles. I've been at IHS, or the Institute for Human Services, for 13 years. I'm originally from the state of Texas, so I moved to Ohio 13 years ago. I still haven't quite gotten used, as Maria and I were talking, with the clouds that we're living under today. But that's okay, we all adjust, don't we? So in the last 13 years, I've spent my time at IHS working in trainer development. And what that has meant is really providing support and training for trainers. Also work within the system to develop the requirements for trainers based on what we've seen are the needs of the system. And so those are the things that I come with today. I know that a lot of what your work is in the area of foster care and adoption. And so today we're probably not gonna talk directly about those topics. We will talk about bringing in trainers for those topics. So in that sense, we will be talking a little bit about that. What does that sound like to you all? Is that
Great.
something we can live with? Okay, great. Now, I unfortunately wasn't here Monday, so I didn't get to hear your stories, and I don't want you to have to retell your stories, but I do want to know a little bit about, what you do, and that will kind of help me in directing my conversations with you all today. So if we can start here, and you can just tell me a little bit about what you do back home.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure. My name is Sue Austin. I'm from Zimbabwe, and I train for Zimbabwe Dolphins. And we've been using the series. We're up to Virtual 3. So we train caregivers in the government. Some are working with government, some are in faith-based organizations, foster parents, and then I work in adoption foster care, helping people go through the process, people who want to adopt, who want to foster, just sensitizing them about what is involved, helping them do paperwork.
So this is Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe level.
Without words.
My name is Ray. I'm from the same organization. Do more or less the same, but I focus very much being a pastor on the church side, engaging the church.
Sean, staying working as a full-time coordinator for LAM and Global Festival Network. Previously psychology lecturer, basically trying to look at how we can integrate a hub of trainers to strengthen the coalition of African trainers and capacity building.
Okay. And so you work in the continent of Africa, like in the different
That
countries.
is, yeah, that's the focus.
My name is Sarah. I'm from Brazil. I'm part of an NGO called Pontes de Amor, Bridges of Love. Basically, we work with pre and post adoption. We also offer training for professionals who are working on child welfare. And we also develop programs with kids who are in foster families or in residential care. And we're also part of a national network of more than 160 NGOs that do similar things to what we do. And I'm leading this association right now.
And it's all from Brazil.
It's all over Brazil, yeah.
My name is Luda. We do some trainings for foster care or practitioners for those children. We don't have many trainers in our organization. We invite some people from different organizations to provide some topics. And we would like to do this more structured and more professional. So that's training development is very important.
Good.
I'm Karen from Child Physics Center Bangalore. I'm training here. I do curriculum development as well. So we've been through module 4 of MOOC 5 with the Lab International. So we train module 1 intensively, and we just started to train module 2.
My name is Sam from Child Physics Center. I'm the project director for the organization. And we work with kids, children, teenagers, with trauma, we have big problems for them. And so just oversee daily operations and also different projects.
I just want y'all to know I wasn't rude to Lana. I know her.
My name is Jeff. I work with us
Okay.
Safe Together.
Uh-huh.
But my passion is the systemic things,
Okay.
government.
Great.
And my name is Alex. I'm from Romania, working for executive director for Romania Without Orphans Alliance. Adopted father with 4 kids, plus about 3 in foster. 4 years ago, when I started being executive director, meant to do almost everything. But now, as we grow, during these 4 years, we developed programs like TCC, refresh camps, support groups, and others for caregivers. And now we are in a process where we want to build a competency-based training system.
Great job.
Yes.
I'm Dave from Ethiopia, and I work with an organization called Child Development Research Center. Basically, we train people who are one way or another working with children, like child-focused organizations, NGOs, government officials, parents, those who are directly or indirectly have contact with children. So I could be the training.
Okay, good.
When I work with them,
Okay.
I'm Gule.
He's my
Yes.
boss.
He's your boss. Okay. Okay, great.
And you know me.
I know Maria also. So great. Okay, we're ready to get started. One of the things, and I gave y'all a copy of, for y'all to take your notes. I know that the pictures are rather small. So I was so glad when I saw that we had a projector that we could project. And so you say, so, why this? Well, one of the things to talk about initially is about, the system that we created in Ohio. Many years ago, we were given the responsibility to train all of the state of Ohio. And, we had to do it in a way that was manageable, that was affordable. And so one of the things that we did initially was that we divided the state into 8 regions. And we divided our training that way. And even though, one of the purposes for creating our system was to create consistency across the state in the training that we were providing to caseworkers and to foster parents and adoptive parents and supervisors. And so the way to do that was to create a system where all of us were working together, but it was more feasible if we could regionalize it so that, number one, our constituents, the people we were training didn't have to travel so far. And so that we could develop trainers in local areas that didn't have to travel. And since we have a system where we contract trainers rather than hire trainers, it makes it a lot easier, because then we find experts within the different regions that can train our standardized training and our non-standardized training, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So we have, where the stars are in this map, that's where our regional offices are. And our regional offices are run pretty independently or autonomously. They are responsible. These, if you see these little squares, these are what we call counties. And that's little central areas that have their own agencies that provide services to families. And so we feel that needs of the different regions are different based on the counties that are within that region. Some of the things to consider is whether they're urban counties or rural counties, because, you know, one of the things is that what is needed for cities is different than what is needed for the country, you know, for the countryside or for the rural areas. And so by having it regionalized, you're able to then focus your training on the particular needs of that region. So one of the things that our regional training centers do is they visit the counties and they talk to the county agency and find out what their training needs are. And then they can focus their training on the particular needs of those counties that they've had the conversations with. In our map, for example, this right here is where we're at in Columbus. And a lot of the work that happens in this area happens in Columbus and the general area. Very urban, very diverse in population. So even though they have other counties, a lot of it is focused here, but then some of the needs here, they address differently because they're more rural counties than Columbus is. The other thing that's fascinating about this map is if you see the little star up at the top, all by itself in this little teeny tiny place. Well, that's Cleveland, Ohio. I don't know if you guys know about Cleveland, Ohio, but Cleveland, Ohio is like a country in itself, some say. I think they would like to be a country. So their needs, their population is so large that they only are that county. Their own region is just that county. But then you have, for example, this region and this region are our smallest, more rural regions. And so there's less people that they train, the needs are different. When you talk about funding, the funding is impacted because they're much smaller, even though they cover a lot of territory, there isn't as many in their population. So when you're thinking about creating a system, and for some of you all that are working in a country as a whole or as a region in an area, these are some of the things to think about. So, you know, looking at your situation, what would you think about this? What comes to your mind in looking at setting up a system like this? What would you have to consider?
I was thinking of the whole country.
Mhm.
It looks like this.
Mhm.
We have administrative regions, so we can have a training map like this one.
Mhm.
Seeing the population, whether it's rural or city, the challenge. We are starting now with one region, but we can have this kind of.
Yes.
We have already set up, I mean, this is a country of 100 million people, like the second most populous African country,
Uh-huh.
and with like rugged terrain. So it's not that much accessible.
Right.
And we have communities like 85% is rural.
Mhm.
And almost, we work mostly with evangelical churches, and they tend to be in the cities.
Mhm.
So these are some of the factors that you
Mhm. Yeah, and the needs are different. You know, one of the things that we really emphasize in our system and with our trainers are the issues of diversity.
Mm.
I think that, a lot of times when we think about diversity, we think about differences in races or differences in ethnicity. But, there's differences that go beyond that, socioeconomic levels,
Culture.
rural people, country people
Mm.
versus city people. Those kinds of things have to be considered. So if you develop regions, your regions might look a little different. But the thing that you want to stay true to is that stack of books that Ruby showed us today. Is, wherever you're going to, best practice is best practice.
Right.
And so in your regions, even though we're different and our needs are different, we stay true to what is best practice. So that a child or a family that is in this part of the state is having the same opportunities as the one up there in a different part of the state.
Beth, when you're talking about dividing the state in areas or in regions, how many people do you usually have on a training? How many sessions?
How many participants?
Yeah.
We usually say we have a minimum of 8 or a maximum of 25. For a good training situation. Now, sometimes it varies depending on the situation, nothing is said in black and white, but that's what we kind of shoot. Ruby, you were gonna say
Yeah, I
something?
do. And in the developing countries we've been working with, Sarah, what we've found is it's very difficult to hold to that because of the need and the need being great and what you want to do. So it is not uncommon to have very large groups in training. And that really requires modification and some really creativity in terms of being able to get the dialogue going with groups, but it is possible. We've had to do that. Sue, for example, they just did one of the trainings in Zimbabwe where they had 40 registered participants, 40 registered, and they ended up with over 90
Graduated
people.
95.
Wow.
Graduated 95. So it's not uncommon, and we did a training there for 125. We've done a training for 250, and still can do group work. It's really difficult, but we also have to recognize in the developing countries we're working with, we are working in situations where people travel and there's difficulty getting to a training. So having a lot of trainings might not work out as well as for having 7 people from one get in a vehicle and come together, rather than just sending one so we can keep the numbers at 25. It's just one of the dynamics that we work with.
But does it mean then, Ruby, that you have dual leadership?
Always have to be collating.
Yeah,
We
but
do-
that,
we do
I guess,
collators.
very important that we are not alone. in
No,
doing
we
the
always,
training.
we always. do
Because our
collators.
training is usually one person training.
No, you can't.
But I would imagine that having a larger group and having more than one trainer would help.
We always have 2 trainers,
Yeah,
and that's what we recommend.
We always train with 2.
Yeah.
We always
That
train
we do
with 2.
collating.
Can I just make a comment on what you had said, that particular group that we did module 1 with? We took 6 months because we only had access to them 1 day a week, 1 day a month, 1 day a month. And there was some language barriers and not high academic levels across the group. So we took about 6 months to train that group on module 1, which should take 3 days. But it was phenomenal because just by giving them the time, they were able to interact, they were able to ask their questions. And it was really quite a success. It was very successful, but that adapting to what was needed in that space.
Lana has some.
Yeah, I just wanted to add just a little bit. We have slightly different numbers for our online learnings. The
Mhm.
minimum is 5.
Yeah.
And a few times we actually had just 3 people show up.
Mhm.
It's not feasible for us to do that, but we did intensive training. It was online, and yeah, the max is 24.
This time, so for our country, there are what we are calling counties. There for us is district.
Okay.
So there is 10 provinces, which I think would be states here, and then there are 59 districts. So I'm trying to figure out how
the way forward, we're going to address that. So what we are saying, we are talking about the trainers themselves in the district or in the county. Are we talking about further down, caregivers, or we're just talking about the trainers?
She's just talking about
Okay.
trainers.
Now, actually, the trainings are within the region.
Yes.
Now, we have trainers that travel the state, and Ruby can tell you about that, because she's traveled all of the state of Ohio. But it also gives you the opportunity, for example, like if you want to hire someone who has an expertise in a particular topic,
Uh-huh.
and that person has a full-time job already.
Okay.
So they can't be traveling all over your country training. Maybe they can train in this province where they live in, because then they don't have to travel as much. It gives you that ability to do that. And now, if we, let's say we were in the state of Ohio, and we created the system, but all of the training was here because we said, oh, that's the middle of the state, therefore it's everyone can go there. Well, everyone can go there, but for someone who lives way up there or way down here, that becomes a hardship, and we want to make it easier for them to get there. Where you're having to travel difficult roads, and it's easier to travel, 50 miles rather than 100 miles. That kind of, considering that kind of thing. But, so it helps the trainee, what we call the trainees or the participants, because they don't have to travel as far. But as a training center, it gives you the option to recruit trainers in your region that you know are content experts. Okay? And that doesn't mean that if there's someone down here that has a very specific expertise, that we won't invite them to go up there. But, it just gives us the ability to have them be more localized. But I think in all situations, it depends on where you're at, where your system is. It gives you possibilities for growth. It may be that you start out, you have one place where you do it, but maybe you'll add another place. You've identified a different part of the country that you see that there's a lot of potential. So you might open a region there, and think about it that way.
You might answer to this question later, but if not, how can it address now? How do you do not compromise the quality of the training? Because either the number, for example, we need to Moldova training to 350 people, or because of the short time available that people give.
Well, everyone commits to do the length of training that is required. So if that's what you're asking about, as far as trainer, like if a trainer has another job and is training for you,
No,
what do you mean?
not because of the trainer, because of the participants.
That they don't attend.
Yeah, they don't have, for example, we teach TCC, I think it's model 1, in 3 days, but they have only, they came now, for example, in Myanmar, one of the cities, they said, oh, we want to expose all 500 foster parents, but we have probably a day in the end 6 hours.
So you're not doing training of TCC then. What you're doing is you're doing an overview, and that is not training. That's not something you would, I would encourage you to get a certificate for. In looking at certificates, and this is something, and a little bit of a side step here. When you're looking at building your training system, we're working with paradigms that are not necessarily in place yet. So for people to come to a 3-day training, that paradigm might not be there, might not be a normal way for them to even think that they would go someplace and be there for 3 days. But when you're looking at giving certificates and building your training system, what you're doing is you are bringing into the system new ideas, new ways of thinking, and you're bringing the value of a comprehensive training, of spending that time together, doing it right, and then walking away with a certificate that says you've completed it. So you bring value to the certificate. Anything you can do to get that certificate recognized in universities, in the state, in the province, in your country, brings value to that. But you absolutely hold fast to the fact you don't give that certificate to anyone who misses the training. It is for completion. Completion means you're there every day. And that we've found that people get really frustrated. Well, I was here every bit. Well, I had a real emergency. It was really important. Yeah, we recognize that, and we're so sorry. But this is what we give certificates for, completion. You see, so you're going to build it. Now,
Yeah, we have very strict rules about what it takes for them to get credit for training. And to the point that you have to be there no later than 15 minutes after it started. You have to be there the whole day. You have 2 15-minute breaks, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. You have 1 hour lunch break. Everything starts at 9 and ends at 4. And if you're not in there with the required times, you don't get credit for the training. And sometimes it's difficult. People will say, well, I had an emergency with one of the kids. And again, like Ruby says, we understand, but we have to hold people to the time, because then they're not getting the complete training. And then that's how you start kind of losing the value of what you've got to offer them.
I'll give you a really great story. In Ethiopia, they had done a training, and they had a person of influence that wasn't able to make one of the days, and really thought he should get a certificate anyway, and yada yada. But Ethiopia held fast to that, and they came up with not the best solution, but it was a solution. You have to come back in, and when the training is going to be the next time, and you have to complete that day. And so, because it's a standardized curricula, there's pretty much predictability that what they miss are going to be able to pick up. And he did.
Yeah.
He came back to the training and finished it. And this was holding, sometimes we have to hold to our principles. And even with people who maybe have a lot of influence and power and a lot of sass, to really give us a little bit, but you did. And he came and finished the training.
But also, I feel like you gotta have to, let people know about this well ahead and prepare them so that if there's going to be any other commitments, they will need to set aside that time, make sure that they will attend, but nothing else will come in between.
That is such a true statement. I think when you set these up, people need to know ahead of time. You can't hit them with it when they got there and then do it. They need to know when they got there what the expectation is and what it's going to take for them to get the certificate. These are the requirements.
I have a question about consent. Maybe I don't know if that would generally work into a training section to say these are the expectations of the trainer. This is what is expected in training, and hereby by applying and going through the process of training, I do agree to these standards as a consent. So that, I think maybe, I don't know if that would be what you would use in a training.
We don't formally do that with the participants. Now, the trainers we do. We have responsibilities. They have to agree to the rules of the game. For participants, they know what the rules are. But I think that when you're first starting, you're setting a new norm. So you have to really educate about what the expectation and the rationale are for it, because adults are going to respond to rationale. They're not going to respond to just you telling them that, that they have to do it. It's kind of, talking about the fact this is a very structured training. The information and the content has to go together in order for you to be able to have the skills to do what you need to do afterwards. And if you have gaps in it, you're not gonna be able to do it. You're not gonna have the skills. You may have the awareness, but then you're gonna have gaps.
I believe there's a cultural matter here on this point also, depending on where you are. For example, how flexible you're going to be about time. It's really cultural sometimes. And in some points, I think your idea is very important, to maybe them to sign something, because then you can show, remember in the beginning, we said that, and
You agree to
agree
this.
with that.
But in other ways, probably we have to challenge the culture. Because, for example, in Romania, if you have a training like that, someone will receive a phone, will feel that, oh, I can take a phone to go.
I can what?
I can answer the phone, go out and answer the phone.
That happens here too.
It has to be challenged, probably, some of those.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I think that you're exactly right. Each of you come from different cultures. You know your culture, you know what it's gonna take for you to be able to be successful. And for some, the formality of a contract with a participant will make the difference. For others, having an educational piece about it will be sufficient. But the bottom line is that sometimes there's just gonna be personality things. And people are gonna do what people are gonna do. I mean, I don't know, but there are some people that are gonna do what they're gonna do.
Well, and we've adjusted in terms of looking at the criteria, the principle of you must be there for completion, and recognizing the cultural nuances of how they look at time. And really, we've set aside on day one where we have started late because it's just been where the culture has been. But then we set the clear picture. Tomorrow we're starting at this time, and we will start no matter who's here. So if you're 15 minutes late, recognize you're not going to get your certificate. So, and we do it with humor. We would put some humor into it, and start to try to gain some of that understanding that for this might be different from what you've expected in the past.
Well, I know that culturally, I come from a very laid back culture, and time isn't as how would you say, as strict, I guess, as it is for other groups. And so I've had to learn that it doesn't matter, what my tendency is. I had to follow the rules also. And so in the case of setting up a contract, I think that makes it very clear. All of us are adults, and when we sign a commitment, then we hold ourselves to them. No matter what our tendency is, or I say, people say be there at 9 o'clock. That's 9-ish. I don't know if you know all about 9-ish. That's 9-ish. When I was growing up, church started at 7, but it really was 7-ish. And so I understand that, and there's a lot of us that come from that perspective. But in the work world, we sometimes have to make those changes. Any other comments?
It was just a comment on people completing the content. So you're issuing a certificate, and for example, for us, we're issuing a certificate that says that you have completed 30 hours of trauma series 1, and then that goes into their CV. They're then going to use that to apply for the next job, maybe, to say, well, look, I did it. And then they blow it on the job or make a mistake. It's like, but Zim Without Orphans trained you. So then it dilutes our credibility and the content, it dilutes the credibility of the content that we have. So I think that is really, and they will do it. I mean, they definitely collect caregivers will collect those certificates, and that's a recommendation to their skill sets. So I think it is really important that they fulfill the whole thing.
So, one of the things that I was thinking about is, in looking at, in our system, what are the things that we do and who's responsible for what? In our system, it really, we have, in the system that I'm involved, we have a steering committee, an OCWTP steering committee. And I don't know if y'all have talked about that. I don't want to be redundant if you haven't, but in that system, we have a group of people that meets on a monthly basis to look at big picture decision-making for our system. And in that group is represented the Institute for Human Services, the what we call PCSAO, which is the Public Children's Services
Of Ohio.
of Ohio. And that's like the advocacy group for child protective service agencies. They represent the counties. And then the State Department is part of the steering committee. And so we are all responsible for doing the work of the system. The people in the steering committee that are part of the state and part of the PCSAO are kind of they guide the process. They provide leadership. But in the day-to-day operations, the work is done by the Institute for Human Services and by the regional training centers, okay? Of which I showed you, there's 8 of them. So there's 8 directors and their staff. They usually are attached to a county agency. So we've kind of split up some of the tasks that we do, and then there's some of the tasks that we do together. And I thought I would draw a picture of what that might look like, and see what that might look like for you all. So both of us are responsible for determining what the operational structure of our system is going to be. And what that means is we together we create the policies and the procedures for the training system. I don't know if they've spoken to you about the policy manual. I would recommend that you look for it in the OCWTP.net website. We have the listing of our policy manual. And in it, one section is about the operations of the system, how the system runs. It identifies the tasks of each of the members of the steering committee and what their roles are going to be. And then there's another section that is specific to all things trainer, because you know that's our primary work is the training system. So I don't want us to take a lot of time looking at that policy manual, but I encourage you to look at it if you would like some a clearer picture of what our policies are that drive our work that we do. So we, on a regular basis, check our policies and procedures, make sure that there aren't any updates we have to make. Recently, we made an update in our policy, for example, to address the issues of copyright, okay? Which is a big issue when we have trainers that are developing their own workshops. And what is it that our federal laws require for us to adhere to copyright rules? And so we developed or updated the policy. We educated the trainers about what that update is. We determined that because our trainers are contract trainers, they are responsible for upkeeping the law and making sure that the materials that they are using have been they have permission to use them, or that they're public domain and can use them freely. So that's an example of something that we did.
So I thought the material is coming from IHS,
What material?
the one which the trainers use at whatever county.
We have, in a minute, we'll go into that a little bit, but we have two different kinds of workshops. We have workshops that are standardized, that we have created and sanctioned and we certify trainers for. And then we have workshops that the trainers themselves develop, and they go through a review process to be approved. And we'll talk about that later and about the difference. So both the RTCs and IHS are responsible for trainer recruitment. We're all always looking for people who can join our system and become trainers. And in a minute, we'll go over that more clearly because we have two kind of distinct roles in that. Together, we monitor and set up development activities for our trainers. And then we monitor our trainers together and we participate in work teams. A lot of the work for our system is done by work teams that address different areas of need. For example, we have a work team that's called the Trainer Development Work Team. And we address all issues related to trainers and the work that they're doing and how to develop the tools to help monitor them. There's a work team that looks at our learning management system. There's a work team that looks at evaluation. So it's groups of people from both systems that work specifically and meet on a regular basis to take care of the needs, of the specific needs of the system related to all of the areas. And then we have things that we split up, and that's where we're going to talk a little bit. We formalize, IHS formalizes the approval of all trainers, which means that sometimes either RTCs or IHS can recruit trainers, but IHS is responsible for ensuring that the approval process happens and that they're formalized. Everyone that comes to the system has to take certain steps in order to be approved in the system. The other thing that the IHS does is that we manage the learning management system, what we call eTrack. And that's the system where we keep all the information about trainers and the workshops that they train and the scheduling of workshops. Because we train almost 2,000 trainings a year. So we have a system that helps us manage that. And each RTC does their own scheduling and they put their scheduling into that system.
Can we have a look at
You would like to have a look at that?
Yeah.
At a break time, I'll pull it up
that, please?
so you can see it. And then IHS is also responsible for writing all of the standardized curriculum or contracting with experts who write the standardized curriculum. And then they are responsible for finding the trainers that will train them and certifying them. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail about that, okay? Regional training centers, they are, as I said earlier, they're responsible for identifying the training needs of their region because the scheduling of training is mostly done by region. Okay, each region schedules their own training. And so they're responsible for talking to the counties, for looking at individualized training needs assessments and determining what trainings are needed in their region. And then they are responsible for scheduling them in each region. I think, is it Friday? You're going to CORTC?
No, tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Tomorrow you go into a regional training center and you'll be able to see how that particular regional training center works. But they have training rooms, so they set up rooms in their training areas. Sometimes in some of the regions, they will use community rooms or church room, churches for training. But each region is responsible for setting up their training rooms, all the equipment, everything that trainers need for the training. And then they develop calendars, and in the calendars that they make available, like for example, to foster parents, they have all the listings of the things. With our learning management system, it's changed a little bit, and some of those calendars are done online rather than typing. And then and they address any issues that happen in the training site, which means if there's problems that are happening with that the trainer needs help with the equipment, or if there's a participant that is having issues, those kinds of things, there's always someone present that can address those issues. So that's kind of a picture of what our system looks like and the work that we do in doing training. Does anyone have any questions?
What will sort of go into create different RTCs in places of low infrastructure, particularly like developing countries, because I think that could be difficult. Because what I think is easier to do in the States, because there's an existing infrastructure and it's easy to plug into that system to create a sort of network for yourself. But I'm thinking, how would you, in the process of developing RTCs, would probably be to connect to government and get their trust, and in that way slowly work towards creating RTCs that plug into the local government entities, I suppose.
But also I think like, let's say, what I call, and this is just speaking on top of my head, if I was in a system, because for many years I worked in a private agency, and for example, a foster care agency or an adoption agency, and let's say there's a group of agencies that work together that already have some kind of collaboration. That in itself could help you create systems like that. Because maybe it's a collaborative you build, and maybe the agencies are in different parts of the state or the country, the province, and you can have trainings centered in those areas. So, it can be informal and it can be formal. I think that you would get a commitment to start doing it and build it from there. Maybe it's, you're not ready yet, but once you have that collaborative going and you start seeing how it can function, then you can from that build a system. Right.
If I take our case, we have been so centralized. We've been doing all our trainings in our training center, at the center of the country. And then last year we planned to expand like we were with visionaries. We wanted to have 15 places. But before we start, one of our staff members actually had to move to another region. So we took that, and then we figured it out, like it's really challenging to set up. But what happened was, because we work closely with church, so we went, that was a city in the southern part of Ethiopia. So we went there, invited like key stakeholders, key church leaders, and then told them, like, we're coming here to serve, and we have this that we can offer. So what do you think? And it was actually, the response was amazing. One theology college actually provided an office for our staff, and a group of people actually ways to do local fundraising for the local trainings. And then church, about 70 per church committed themselves to participating in our trainings. They'll pay for the training. So in that way, we're now having kind of a foothold.
This system has been developing for 30 years, okay? So we didn't start here, okay? This is where we are today. But it's more about having a vision, you know, and then finding what in your world works. It doesn't all have to look the same, and it doesn't all have to start completed. It starts at the beginning with the baby steps. And what is it that within your context you can accomplish? And it's amazing, you know, when you put the word out, what comes back. Did someone have their hand up?
I had, but I looked through your presentation and think I can ask at the end.
Okay, okay, sounds good. Okay, so moving right along. So I think you've heard this a couple of times, that our goal is the best match between trainer, the curriculum, and the learners. That is really our goal, okay? And what that requires of us is that we have flexible recruitment, assessment, and provision of trainers and coaches in our system. And so in an effort to do that, we have found the beauty of contracting with trainers. I know that in some systems, you have staff trainers, and I think it's good to have staff trainers, but I think you also need to be open for contract trainers. And some of the reasons for that is that when you work with contract trainers, it gives you the flexibility to expand your expertise. We have trainers that are psychologists. We have trainers that are doctors. We have trainers, you know, who specialize in specific mental health issues or physical issues. And so they can train what their expertise is. The hook for us is that they have to be able to relate it back to what our focus is, okay? And in our case, it's Child Protective Services. So what does it mean for you as a psychiatrist who is providing medication to kids when you're working with kids who are in foster care or in adoption? What are the things that you need to think of differently? So that person has to be able to train, for example, a group of foster care workers about what are the things they need to look for or advise foster parents about when they have kids who are on medication. Or what about trauma? We talk a lot about trauma. If you're talking about your particular topic, what does that mean for the trauma that kids have been subjected to? And what is it going to look like for foster parents or adoptive parents when they have these kids living with them? So it gives you that flexibility to be able to go outside and find people who really have good best practice in what they do and would be an asset to what you want to train your workers or your foster parents or your adoptive parents.
When you invite contract trainers, do you orient them first? You give them some?
They have to go through an approval process, and they have to have, you know, particular trainings, and they have to be able to do their work to have an understanding of the systems we're working in. In other words, if someone comes to us and then just wants to train their topic, but they don't in any way tie it back to Child Protective Services, then it's not acceptable to us. And we review all of the outlines. We have specific things that we require of them in their outlines that demonstrate to us that they're going to be able to do the tie back. The other advantage of that is that you can have trainers. For example, if you have contract trainers, we have over 250 trainers in the state of Ohio, but they don't all train all the time. Okay?
Full time, it's not full time.
Yeah, we have some trainers that are full-time, but we have some trainers that might train, 4 times a year. Or they might train at particular conferences for us. So we have different levels of trainers. And that's the advantage of having contract trainers also, is that you don't have folks that are depending on the training because they're doing other things. Remember, I talked earlier about it gives people the flexibility to continue to do their full-time job while they're training.
And who is paying the trainers, IHS or the local organizers?
Trainers are paid by the State Department, but IHS is the one that is a conduit that pays.
Okay. So they are directly contracted.
Yes, and we'll talk a little bit about that and how that
Okay,
works.
sorry.
Well,
That's
let
okay.
me respond to that as well, because this is important in the developing countries, of looking at contract trainers and what you're doing. We've got a different model in different places, but the recommendation is that we need to look at a fee for training, even if it's small, and start the paradigms going. And a lot of the countries are not used to doing that. In fact, there are sometimes they're expected to, you pay the cost if you want them to come in, and you pay them for coming.
Sure.
And that paradigm is changing, and we see it working. We just did a training in India, for example. We had, I don't know, a huge, I can't remember how many, 20-some people there, and they all paid their own way in and covered the cost. And that's real different because the culture is different in there, and we have all these issues of payment. But we need to start changing the paradigm. People do not value what they don't pay for. So we need to start looking at, even if it's a small fee, let me tell you how we did it in Ukraine. They disagreed. ILDC, when we started, it said they would never pay, never pay, never pay. We said, yes, they will pay. But we have to start with to introduce the paradigm. So what we did is we started to give a fee for training, small fee, so that we could reimburse trainers. So this is how you pay your trainers. And they said it will never work. I said, well, here's what we do. We offer scholarships. So the training might be $10 for a 3-day training, and we offer scholarships, and people can apply for scholarships. Well, in the very beginning, everybody got scholarships, but nobody knew that. They knew that the training cost $10. That's what they knew. But we gave scholarships. After a period of time, less people asked for scholarships. People said, oh, I can pay that. There's good training. There's value there. I like the certificate, and we're going. But even with the scholarship, they felt like they had paid for it, so they had value. They saw the value in it. And then it wasn't very long. We did a training in leadership that we were looking at training that was being offered in Ukraine. That was leadership training. It was being offered to some businesses and to corporations, and they were getting several $100s for that training. So we told ILDC, okay, we're doing this training. This is the series. What do you think that they would get for this? And they said, oh, probably $500 to $1,000, $500 to $1,000. I said, okay, let's charge $500. We put it out at $500 with scholarships. And it was a 3-part series of leadership training. And then I did the training. And you know what? They paid. They paid. They paid. So it's a paradigm that we shift. So it's like, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater because you don't have a resource right now of funds that gives you that money to pay your trainers. There are creative ways we can come to figure out ways to pay the trainers. You don't have to pay them lot. We started paying our trainers about $15 a day in Ukraine, and now we're paying them over $100 a day.
Again, it's a growth thing.
It is a growth thing.
But there's, we pay our trainers a set amount of money, but we don't pay expenses for them. Like we don't pay mileage or food or anything. They are responsible for their own expenses. And they get paid, on a monthly basis based on when we get funding from the government for them. So they have an understanding of that. We don't have any staff trainers. Sometimes our staff will train on a pinch, especially the standardized training. You know, if there's someone that called off, we might train, or we train training of trainers and training of curriculum. But other than that, all our training is done by contract trainers, even the standardized training. So we have 3 categories of training. Okay, the first category is the core training, what we call our core training, and those are our standardized training usually. We have core training for caseworkers. When they first come in, there is a set of 10 sessions of training that they do. And attached to the workshops are also some learning labs. And and I will in a little bit give you that you have a form where we'll talk about the different kinds of workshops that we do. But core is our standardized training. It's certified trainers who have been trained to train the curriculum by IHS staff. And a lot of times, these trainers are trainers who are actually doing the work in the field. So we try to get trainers that live in the different regions again, because they are still working in the county agencies. We also, we have what we call pre-service, and we have fundamentals. Those are standardized training also. A lot of it done by foster parents and adoptive parents, and by also staff who work with foster and adoptive parents. And then we have 2 other categories. And the other 2 categories are the categories where a lot of our workshops are developed by trainers. And we call them specialized and related. Specialized are closest to core. They're the things that are part of doing the work of foster care and adoption or casework, but not necessarily the core. It's once they've learned the foundational piece. There are other things such as interviewing skills, engagement skills, stress management, secondary trauma. Those kinds of things could be some of the specialized topics. If you look at the competencies that you all have for caseworker, I don't know if y'all looked at caseworker or did y'all look at VK. In caseworker, they're divided by the 200s are the core, then 300s are special. No, the 100s are core, the 200s are specialized, and the 300s are the related. Related are more like what I was talking about earlier, the mental health issues, the diversity issues, those kinds of things that impact the practice but are not directly related to the practice. Okay, and so those workshops are usually developed by trainers.
Can a co-trainer do specialized training as well?
Yes. A lot of times they only do specialized because that keeps them so busy. You know, especially the caseworker corps, some of those trainings are like 3 or 4 days. And that's a lot of days for them to be out of their office. And so they will do just, they will just do the standardized. But they have the opportunity and the option to develop their own workshops also as well. So since we're talking about that, let's look at one of the handouts that I gave you. And I stapled them all together, but this is what it looks like. I think that Ruby also put one. Did you put an outline?
No, I didn't put a
No.
outline in.
Okay. No?
Last
Yeah,
time.
there you go.
No,
It's in the big packet that's stapled together. It's in the big packet that's stapled together. This is already this one. That
We'll do these one.
Yes.
Yes, in that
It's in
one.
that packet, so you're in that flooding, I think. Like some of
everyone
that.
find it?
Yes.
It looks like this. It's blue. Like paper.
Yeah, we have it.
Yeah, we got it.
Okay, so this is the way it works. You know, if we have 250 trainers, if we just left it open, those 250 trainers would probably have 100 workshops out there. But we really take serious the fact that we're a competency-based system that is based on needs of training, okay? So trainers don't just develop a workshop because they had a dream last night about developing a workshop. They really, the way that it works is the RTC has identified a training need in their region, okay? And so they say, okay, we have heard from the counties and we need a workshop in this topic. And who do we know that has an expertise in this workshop, in this topic, that we can approach with these competencies and say, I need a workshop that has these competencies. Can you create one for me? And so they say, okay, well, John has that, so let me approach John about it. John agrees to create a workshop. So he creates a workshop, and this is the process it follows. This is submitted to us. And some of the things that I want to highlight on here is we want the trainer to tell us, what is your content expertise that makes you able to create this workshop? We want you to tell us. We don't, and so, you know, we took some education. Sometimes when we first started this, they would give us their little miniature resume, which we don't want. That's just general. I want you to tell me what it is that you know about family engagement that makes you next, and why it makes you next. And so that's the first thing they have to do. Then they have to write a learning description of the workshop that they're going to create. That's the statement that we publish when we're announcing the workshop. So it's a very important little paragraph that they write, because then the person who's interested in registering will know exactly what they're gonna go to. So it's very important that they learn that. And we want them, as you go down there, the learning objectives, of course, you know, you have to have some direction for what you're gonna be training on. What are your objectives? What is it that people are gonna know when they leave your training? Is really what the learning objective is. And then, of course, they write the competencies that they're gonna be addressing. Because that's important. That's important for us to know that they have connected their material to competencies that we have set out for them. Just for your information, the classification list is related to something that is helpful for people who are looking for a particular topic of a workshop through that learning management system that Alice talked about. So the gray parts, those we can disregard. Those are related to what we do in order to put it into our system. But if you continue where it says workshop outline, we want to know what is the relevance of what you're training to child welfare. Okay, if you're talking about family engagement, how is what you're going to talk about relevant to people who are working with foster families or adoptive families or biological families and in the area of engagement? We want you to be able to state those things because those are the things that tell us that you know what you're doing, okay? And then transfer of learning strategies are so important, right? Why are transfer of learning strategies important?
Because if you don't have the learning unconscious that you're transferring some learning.
Right. In order for your learning activity to really have an impact in the behavior of the learner, there has to be some activities that help them transfer what they learned in their head to what they do. And that's what you do with transfer of learning strategies. So we want you to have a plan. It doesn't happen just by happening. You know, we want you, a lot of times it's like at the end of the training, you say, you give out a little piece of paper and you say, tell me what it is that you're gonna do different because of what you learned today. And so then that helps put it in their mind a little clearer. Okay? So there needs to be some strategies. Diversity issues addressed. It's my favorite. By the way, diversity is my area of specialty, and I love that. But I think it's very important to have to be cognizant of the fact that you need to address differences in your training because everyone is not the same. They may look the same, they may talk the same, but they are not the same. And so you have to make a plan for how differences might impact family engagement. And I think a lot of times in training, we get so caught up in the topic that we forget that. And we start talking about things as if everyone responds the same way to everything. And so we have to help our trainers have an understanding that they need to be cognizant of that. A lot of times what they can do is using their, their case scenarios, adding some diversity to the case scenario is a good way to do that. But it really is something that you have to be deliberate in how you do it. And then this last one is, in our system here, we have what is called CAPMAS, and it's the system that is used to assess the needs of families. And so the state is very focused on us including a statement that says you've considered the area of CAPMAS, and that's what that one is. The other thing is a reference list, because we don't believe that everyone carries all knowledge in their own head, or that everything happened, you know, inside of your head. If you're truly gonna be an expert, you will have done reading, you will have done research about what is best practice. You know, what is research saying out there are the tools or the skills that you need to engage families. So we wanna see your reference list. We wanna see that you took some time to study in developing this workshop, that you didn't just, just say things that came off the top of your head. You may have a lot of experience, but you don't know everything. And also, if you base it on your experience, you're also basing it on your bias. Okay, so that's important. And then, the next part,
What's GAP session?
GAP sessions are a type of workshops, and I will show you in a minute, because I have a chart for you that has the different workshop types. Okay, it's a workshop type. So the next part is where they do their agenda, and it's kind of like their outline, and they tell us what they're gonna do, what their training methods, and how long it's gonna take. Again, you know, you're projecting that, but until you do it, you really don't know. And sometimes it might go longer in one way and shorter in another. But we want you to have some idea, because we want you to be planful about it.
Sam said it is so deep in detail, and it is really, and trainers have great difficulty with it. It's a very difficult process, or let's say not difficult. Once they've done it, you understand how to do it. It is a time-consuming process. It takes a lot of time to actually do that, and recognize that this is not the way it's always been done. This is a developmentally, it takes a long time to get to this. This is pretty sophisticated. But
So all our training materials are based on this, right?
yes, absolutely.
The ones that trainers develop.
The ones that trainers develop, everything that would come that would be approved by IHS has gone through this particular process.
And I mean, when I came 13 years ago, we had, people would turn in an agenda. Sometimes there would be no reference list. Sometimes, there wouldn't be any kind of description. And we've worked on growing this, again, that we've been working on it for several years. I think that it doesn't have to be as formalized as this. For me, it's the concepts. The fact of what is it gonna take for you to feel confident that the person that is developing a workshop for you is doing a good job. Because at the end of the day, it does reflect back on you as a system. You're the one that hired him. You're the one that vouched for him as being an expert. And if their content has no, I call it, has all fluff, then people are gonna know that. And what we found was our constituents were getting more and more savvy and more desiring of more meat. It's kind of like, if I'm coming, if I'm giving you a whole day of my training, I want to go back with something. And it's really easy to keep things at an awareness level and stay very, very basic. But you can only give so much basic. At some point, you need to give some more depth so that people can develop the skills and then actually do it. Because, and that's what we were finding, is that we were having a lot of workshops that were keeping things at an awareness level, maybe knowledge, but not skill development. And people were really hungry. So you take from this what works for you, but understand that really, what are the non-negotiables for you? You know, what are the things that are gonna help you feel comfortable that what you're providing for your participants is meat and you know, and not just love. And again, a process.
Mm.
You know, at work, people know that my favorite word is process.
Mm.
Because you have to be really patient in developing the system, in that you have a starting point. You can't take people where they can't go until they can go.
Mm.
And then understand that it's going to be baby steps.
Mm.
And like I said, we've been working on this 13 years, and it has been baby steps, and we have had to be patient, and we have lost people. We have lost people that haven't bought into the system. But on the other side of the coin, I believe that our workshops have gotten better.
Mm.
And I think that at the end of the day, for me, that's what's most important. And when I have a trainer that is having a hard time with this, I will do whatever I can to help them, to make it happen. Because this is not a you against me kind of thing. This is a partnership. This is benefiting me. So the way that the system works is that once they develop this outline, or they develop this outline in partnership with the RTC representative, then the RTC representative presents this workshop to a review committee. And the review committee is made up of people from work teams who are the experts in that area. For example, there's a caseworker work team. There's a foster care adopted kinship work team. Those folks look at the outline and they sanction the outline before the outline is out. And if there are things that are missing, gaps that need to be covered, then they work with the trainer to get those things done. So that's the way that our system works. Again, in your world, you have to figure out what is going to work.
So you are saying the trainer is the person who generates this training workshop. Is the RTC, don't they identify that we need training for this? Is it the other way around? Who's coming up with
the RTC identifies the training need.
Okay.
Contacts the trainer.
Okay.
Works with the trainer to develop the workshop.
Okay.
Okay? But the primary work is done by the trainers. The trainer is the expert. The trainer is the one that, for example, in engagement, is the one that's gonna write the information, because they're the ones that are gonna train.
And a trainer in the system, that is training in the system, will identify needs as they train as well. Let's look at the supervisory training as an example. Supervisors need specialized and related training past their core training. So a trainer who's working in the system and doing maybe the core training will suddenly see, oh my goodness, supervisors are asking me about this again and again and again. That is a training need. So that trainer then has the right and I think responsibility to go back and to the RTC or to IHS and to say, I'm seeing this need. And then they then can go forward and submit a training curriculum or a training that they've developed if they want to do that. But it has to be done through this format. And I love what Beth Ann said, and let me just piggyback on that because it's really so important. She talked about how willing she is to help. All the regional training coordinators are willing to do that too. There is a real, I want you to be able to do this attitude. Let's make it happen. And there are people that will recommend things that are not qualified to do what they want to do. So you have to kind of work with them and say, okay, that's maybe not going to work. But the goal is let's empower people, let's bring them on, but let's take our responsibility and vet it to make sure that we've been responsible at the leadership level to not be putting something in that is a flavor of the month, but is just because somebody read one book and they've got a little bit of information, they think that they can do a training on it. And let's help them and assess the depth that they have in order to deliver it. vet the outline to make sure that it's developed within the competencies and be responsible. So, but it's a real partnership. I really thank you, Beth Ann, for really hammering that home because it's a good partnership. It's a real healthy one.
But I'd like to see a sample already filled in.
Fill that one?
Yeah.
Oh, I probably have one on my
Yeah.
So,
Because I know this.
I probably
Ruby has developed some.
Yeah.
Because this has come out of vast thought process and obviously I've eliminated some of those. And this is very people. I like to see something when you fill it so that. So you can see it.
Okay, I'm sorry, I just keep going and go free.
I think it's not like the way I said, it's not only useful for our contracted trainers, but I think this tool can also be useful to actually improve and standardize all our trainings.
Yes.
So it's really exciting. Are you going to talk about this is the preparation part. Do the trainers report or generate report from this, or is there any?
Yes, I will tell you that.
My question is related to, I think you mentioned something about, I think maybe down here at the bottom, about core family competencies is determined by a particular body. That's correct. I'm not sure if I understood.
The competencies?
Yeah, I think the connection case to the process, assessment, safety planning, service planning, and permanency. But you mentioned something about that there's these core things that relate to the family needs.
Yeah.
If I'm not understanding you, perhaps correct.
The competencies?
Yeah, I think
Are you
so.
talking about, because,
Yeah.
they're,
Well,
every
that's-
tra-
yeah,
every
that fits
training,
in, so-
every workshop has to be attached to competencies.
Sure.
And if it was for caseworkers, there are caseworker competencies that are already listed. So when we approach a trainer to develop a workshop, we also have the competencies that say, these are the competencies we want you to cover in this workshop.
And is there, in the States, is there like a kind of an overview model that would suggest these are the core competencies for family-based care, I suppose? And from those, you would relate how that relates to training, I suppose.
The Ohio Child Welfare Training Program has a set of competencies for caseworkers, for foster parents and adoptive parents that are set. And so we also have individualized training need assessment that they fill out that identifies the competencies where there's gaps. Mhm. So that's one tool they use. The other tool is talking to the counties about what they're seeing in their county that our training needs. And so in those cases, then when they get those needs, they tie them to a competency.
This resource center and institute received money from government, the state government, this city or state government. How is the amount of funds related to the particular training? What I mean. So you identify that some people need some particular topic, and you contracted a trainer to develop this training. It takes time. Maybe it's not now in your list, so it's something new. And, how you could relate the resources that provided to start, because for standardized training, it's a system you repeat it from time to time, and it's not easier, but it's less resources needed by now because you developed some teach this,
When
and
train-
how you
when
apply,
trainers-
apply to cover this amount. It's expensive, we need to cover this.
Trainers are not paid to develop collections. They're paid only to train. Okay, so whatever they do in developing the workshops, it's in there.
Then the rule, so they need to come to the institute with developed.
They,
already
what they do is they develop the workshop, they give it to the regional training center person, who brings it, who takes it through the process, where it's reviewed. So their role is to create the workshop and then submit it for.
But there is some material, some basic material that you do have.
The standardized curriculum.
Yeah.
Yes, so in a standardized curriculum, the trainer would come and get the training on content. And they then get certified to train. Okay. But they don't get paid to come to the training of content. Okay, they get paid to train. Okay, so let's take, let's take a 15-minute break.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
And I'll bring up one of the E-Track, I'll show them the E-Track. I'll
Okay.
just put one on jump right in so you can see it.
Where are you gonna check? Sorry? Yeah.
Yeah, she's
I
got.
thought you had your hand up earlier. The short's been
I'll put one up on the E-Track.
No, I've just seen most of the countries, it's just happening.
Well,
Very formal.
Yeah, I think, every situation, it's a different, it's, we have, but I think.
Choose
it's
the
up to
right
him.
break up.
It's international.
Keep track of
Suicide is an
of these things.
No, but I was in his book about suicide, it was very useful.
Oh, yeah.
Training, serving, able to. Right. Because you can't, I mean, they are specialized.
Because it was summarized,
I am obviously, I imagine that you are doing the same, you always ask for around the participants without the expectations.
As many as I could get.
And then you can see that very different things are being taught, and some of them are rather defined subjects. And many people have.
Okay, great.
Very
We'll let them know that you want us offering. Yeah, they just want one. Yes, okay, great. We'll do it.
And it is so hard. I've been struggling a lot with that, yeah, that to energize them, and they say, what do you want us when we have the access to the basics in rural areas, there's a shortage of workforce. I mean, mobility, transportation, so very basic, and then you're talking about competency. They are on this. I mean, I agree. This is excellent, and especially when it's about funding and approval. On the other hand, what we were talking about yesterday, we've been talking with Judith is how to utilize all these documentations, evaluation and research in the countries where there hasn't been any kind of outcome measurement done on the actual work. And that would be very essential. Yeah. To give some feedback on where are you, for them to feel that it makes a difference, it really makes sense, and although it's a very slow procedure, instead of giving this hopelessness kind of background, just demonstrate it. Here it is.
Well, and I mean, that's the way it's been for us.
Yeah.
You know, like, for example, in the workshop, and it was, we started, I guess I should have brought,
I have one of my E-tracks on there, so we can throw that up and show it to them.
we started, I would just say, the outline was totally different. Very basic. In fact, we started with a sheet, and they could still read the outline their mom. And so then we were having a hard time.
The development of the whole, when it comes to the evidence base, in Europe they don't do that. Because there is, I mean, even the evidence, to be honest, is so low. There are always small scale studies. And is it relevant to different culture? No, the American evidence.
That's right.
Control. Come on, in Cambodia, that they haven't even confronted with all the war.
They haven't even come.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
So what kind of evidence?
Yeah.
And I find it
That's
really
why I call it
kind
evidence.
of arrogant that we are just evidence based. So I mean, well, I see our colleagues all over so deep badly paid, not valued highly. So I always feel this training that actually nurturing them is my primary role. Because oftentimes their need for emotions support is stronger than the content. At the end of the day, of course, it's important how to recognize the use this person. That is why I'm so annoyed now seeing also here is many like rationally increased number of online courses when you don't have this personal relationship. And I feel
Especially in our
I can make a difference by having an ongoing relationship. And it is also enriching me. I feel that it's really tiring, but it's much different than online. No?
Yeah, it's, especially in social studies. How can you teach students to have relationships when you do it in a non-relationship way? As it is, we're fighting on this battle because the only relationship they have is to their technology.
Yeah, and actually I was last year in California. I attended, Eileen Pastel was conducting the new Pride program of the Child Welfare League. And as I've been a Pride Master Trainer in Hungary for many years, I was attending this vocational and I wanted to see what's going on and also I wanted to be qualified for the new program. And I couldn't believe what I heard, that some people from Nevada were complaining that the online courses aren't working because there's no proper internet access for the social media people. You wouldn't expect that in the United States. It's not developing world. It's the middle of the United States.
That's what we're hearing about it.
Do you? I mean, what are we talking about? It's so unfair.
It's about priority.
It's really so then the most deep pride, that's what I told you yesterday, because she was mentioning Sweden, universal. But even in Sweden, which is the most developed country from a social service perspective, remote areas are also deep pride. No nurse wants to live there. Accessibility, transportation, also the local authorities are underfunded compared to Stockholm and the big city. It's the same like here, the Cleveland. I mean, do you know that Cleveland used to have the biggest Hungarian population? But now it's not a Hungarian city anymore, but it used to. No, so it is. So we have to balance somehow in this very.
And that's why when I talk about I want people to think about what you said.
Sure,
You know,
exactly.
what might that look like?
Yeah, we contact with your
It's very tempting to have a better structure. The system, the question is how realistic.
It's out on.
And then if you have limited resources, then the other question is, what are you using? So I think, you know, filling in the form, what you want to use, just as much
And that has to be something that you may not
You know,
want.
I think, smart enough.
But I would say right now, my sense is that you also need to really be.
No, it's enraging. I mean,
That you have a clear
I
picture
agree.
on what is the
70%.
program. And that you understand when you're
Exchange
operating.
programs.
Very
More
hard to
than
just, for
first
example,
green light,
and you're breaking it down. into
80s
small
and
sections.
becomes
It's not exchange stuff, that's right.
Listen.
It's the very same thing that we have to just run in little tiny sections.
Before the Hungarian Association for Social Services in
I
88.
don't know if you have
And
your.
then I
But anyway,
remember the first ever study and
little sections.
I mean, I was just taking on the association, taking since he's really,
So that's one of the things you think about.
even if it's not
3-day training.
culturally appropriate, you have to adapt it. But it comes under your skin, and that's the way you learn. And it's changes, it's also
And that's one of the things.
So we had actually, we had a so-called twinning. So the development stage is twinning. So developing. So in ours, river is nowhere it's twinning.
Whatever you want,
Obviously, Norway is very and
So.
oh, and they have been very conservative and very decentralized. Actually, not very open. They've had a number of severe scandals recently, taking refugee and migrant yeah, into care. Because they are very strict, very good. Total balance and instead of helping the immigrants, this has meaning separating the kids. Can you imagine? In a system where they are unlimited resources. And then even there was a scandal in Romania where parties even placed into separation. Anyway, and we're not allowed to speak Romanian in terms of kind of insensitive idiotism. I'm sorry.
So,
And, you know, I know.
Sweden, what are you doing? Yeah, I know.
It's just, it's
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. If you cannot read emotional, communicate, does it make sense? That's the same in and somehow it can be done. We can do that. So it is really very.
it just seems like we're going back in time.
Exactly, and the Muslim products of the that they are, they can complain. I mean, it's, yeah, it is, and it's even more. Yes.
Yeah.
There are no checks and balances.
No.
Yeah.
It's not.
No, I feel that we are looking back to the I feel that no, but we were building up to the same.
It's like, what good did it do?
Can you imagine going to wellness? Enjoying horses. No, sometimes I really think that
They're like, why?
yeah, and then we go back, and they
No,
tell me
this
anything.
gas
When
thing
they
is
have
terrible.
their knowledge of the years. You can see how easy it is to ruin these systems.
Well, I mean,
And there is
so they're trying to get it, at least here the family side. She doesn't want the family to go, but the church can't just wait on
I'm really,
So she was given
no, I don't want to be.
tomorrow morning to make a
But
decision.
also,
She
I
can't be
feel
an
that
altar.
it is hard to convince
We
me.
get close to her office, so she has to make up her mind.
That's true, exactly. I can reach out when you
Exactly. Whereas, the thing to do is we have to try again and again every day.
Right?
That's how it keeps going. And I only hope that the churches.
Some have again, but
What do you think we should get at?
Someone's gotta give.
Yeah. I say,
It's beyond.
they need to say that she don't want anything to be involved. So.
It's, Marriott Conference. And then Santa.
No, but what's the website?
Oh, I'm sorry, for OCW.
The URL, the link.
Oh. Marriott.com, hotels.
Her phone is not working, so just taking the URL.
Marriott.com, hotels. Sam, smart one.
Yeah.
so it's not to compromise. That's a little bit. I understand. This is your computer. Connect.
No.
Or you won't become a threat. Okay, let's say any of this. Okay, this is so if you put two houses, this is one. I think that's there are some other things.
That's where.
There was a person.
See how many.
But when you look at the reality, how we train trainers, we know what it takes here to really get a training to be able to deliver it at a standardization that it and quality, all that. You know, but the reality of these development is we don't have people who have the foundational understanding. Again, we often can't find the right people, you know, so we have to go with people who are the best we can as development engineers. And what I try to tell people is, you pick this up. I can train you as a trainer. When you pick this up, and chances are it wasn't a trainer. Right at this level, so they're going to be on this stage. Training can go to stage, but they can't. But the next time you do it, if they're a good trainer, and you're managing them, and you're monitoring them, and you're coaching them, then the next time they'll go to stage. Because they will learn by doing. It is not the best way, it's not what we recommend, but it's all we have. I mean, if I'm looking at the countries that I work in, I'm looking at, we've got a lot of
Okay,
work.
so this is our e-track system.
Are we back from the risk? So you
We have,
Yeah, but there has to be
we have a learning catalog.
It's too heavy.
This is where, if we're looking for a workshop, this is where we find it. We can find it, or if we wanna
So rather than
create a learning, we
like
can create it on.
that's unbelievable. Yeah, I'll tell you, if you look at all these.
Let's say
modules in some systems and in Ohio in particular, you might have
That's
a
the
trainer
confidence.
to do everyone needs because they have the expertise, they've done the study.
But even here, I guess, this is also.
So let's say that they come out, so it's 99. 99.
That's not the case. And this is very important.
So then all of the workshops that are from that competency come up. Yeah. And so then you press on here, and then it gives you the information about the title, who wrote it, and then all the information about it. Like, for example, you know that it's a 6-hour workshop. You know, it's an overview, it tells you the title, the description of it, the competencies that they work. So that's where, when a workshop is approved, then it goes to the person who puts all this information.
Oh, so you have one person.
Right, at IHS, yeah. And then the RTCs, when, yes, she uses that page to fill it up. There's a thing here called creative learning. Yeah, right here, so you go to creative learning, and it takes you through the steps to fill it out.
And centralized one person.
One person does it, and then all of the RTCs and IHS have access to it. And the RTCs then go in here when they're scheduling a workshop and they put it in here. And so that's how the calendar is created. Yeah, and then we also have in here. We have the policy. There are, for example, let's say we're looking for leaders. We just have to see what it is. And it gives you all the Johnstons that we have. So we click on Ruby, and then it tells us that she's an approved trainer, and then it'll list all the workshops that she's certified to train.
Small pockets.
She's certified to train lots. So all of them are Ruby's training.
And the certification is coming from architects.
Yes, some of these are standardized, some of these are the specialized and related that she created. And then some of, I think she does coaching also.
Yeah.
So it has the skill sets that she is able to coach
And I
and
guess these
also listen.
So
What
are the sections?
Can you go to the main one? Again,
To the main one again?
just want to see options.
But then I think she wants to what section?
Yeah, so one's the name.
I'm sorry?
What are the different headings that it is documented on? One is the name of the trainer
On where?
on their website, on that link.
I think that's,
Oh,
this is what we want to do. This is the main menu.
This is the main menu. Learning catalog lists all the workshops. Or you can enter workshops into there. So like, once a workshop is approved, we have a staff person at IHS who puts all the information in here. And then it becomes available for the RTCs to come in here and schedule a workshop. And then, that's the learning catalog. The facilitator catalog is where we put all the trainers. So if we're looking for a trainer and we want to see what their area of training is, like for example, and list all those downstream, her up, and it will give you all the course and it does that for every trainer. So that when the RTC wants to schedule the training, they can pull it up by the number of the course or by the number of the training or the number. We bought the learning management system. But really, it is what we call a boxed program, which means that we're limited to what they're right. So sometimes it's quirky, but it's a lot better than what we had before, which was, I think it was in a DOS, you know? So that was really bad.
But there are very good open source that you can actually use for free.
And then the other section here is the sessions section. And this is the section that is used to create a schedule, a workshop. So this is what RTCs use to schedule the workshops. TEDS is the name of the company that we got it from. TEDS.
There are,
Yes.
we don't know what we don't know yet in terms of what we know, but you ask questions. We'll see what kind of return we can get from people.
Somebody wanted to see a creative outline.
Yeah.
This is Ruby's outline.
Okay.
She did resilience as a leader. And so she gives her trainer expertise. Y'all see that? And then her learning description is right here. So that's what the RTCs put in their schedule. They'll put the title, the name of the trainer, and her learning description. And that way, people who sign up for it know exactly what they're going to do. So that's where that learning description is. And so, as you can tell, she has learning objectives. She has the competencies that she's using listed on there. And then classification list really is specific to that E-track that I was showing you. Like, let's say, we're not the only ones that can use it. The participants can also, or the county staff, or the foster parents. Like, let's say a caseworker is looking for something on conflict management, a supervisor. they can click conflict management and this workshop will come up. And so they'll know that Ruby is able to train this, or maybe Ruby has scheduled to train this and they can go to that training. And then she has her relevance to child welfare. You know, even though it's resilience, it's about resilience, she's tying it into child welfare. And it's specific to people who work in the field of child welfare. And her transfer of learning strategy, she addresses diversity issues within her workshop.
Could you make it a little bit bigger?
Make it a little bit bigger?
No, sharpen.
Maybe it's this here.
Yeah.
That help?
Yeah, it's better, thank you.
You can make it right from there when you try first time.
I can do what?
Yeah,
So
just
make
make
it
it,
bigger to the, where you will try first time.
Oh, you want it bigger?
Yeah.
Okay. How's that?
Better, always.
Super.
Y'all are my kind of folks. Okay. So then, she has a reference list. You know, the reference list doesn't have to be 200 references, you know?
No, that's enough.
That's too many, yeah.
Very much.
But if you have, you know, she's got a good number here of references. We make sure that they're reliable references and that they're updated, you know, that it's what's happening now, not what happened in 1900. And, oops. Uh-oh.
My
She has
reference list.
more. All the way down
I
low.
tend to have big reference lists.
She's got a lot of references.
Yeah.
That's good. She's well equipped in her expertise. And so this is what, you know, her first section of her outline. She writes what she's gonna be talking about, you know, what activities she's gonna have, and what, how long it's gonna take her. She has her questions that she's gonna ask. So it just gives the reviewers information to know what's gonna happen in this workshop. So she does that for her whole outline.
Helps train them to get prepared.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, if you don't have a good outline, you're gonna stand up there and forget what you're supposed to talk about, you know? So that's an important.
Send it to us, this sample.
Ruby,
Ruby.
he was asking if you could send it to him.
Yeah, I'll put it on your jump drive, so you'll have it on your jump drive as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I noticed a section where it was grayed out, it wasn't.
Yeah, that's information that we fill out at IHS so that we can put it into our learning management system. That's where we attach the number. Our workshops also have to go through a review for credit or licensing, for social work licensing. And so that's in that gray area. So that information there is for what we call HVAC.
So it's like how long does she have to do that before the workshop? What period of time?
Takes a long time.
Yeah, I think it depends on we have some folks that are faster than other. It just depends on how busy they are with other things. As I was explaining earlier, trainers are not paid to develop their workshops. They're paid to train them. So they have to develop them in their own time. And so for some, it takes longer. Now, the other thing that happens is that sometimes trainers will develop a topic, for example, disciplining children. And they want to train different populations for it. Like they want to train foster parents for it, and they want to train caseworkers for it. But it's, even though it's about discipline, it's two very different approaches. So they will create two outlines. They'll create one for foster parents and one for caseworkers. And so they might have one topic, but they might have different outlines depending on the population.
Question.
Uh-huh.
So in South Africa, you register to the board of the profession that you're in. So for instance, you have the social work board and psychology board that would have to be registered to. Now, what you do is you set up a workshop that you want to present, and then you submit that for review to that board, which is a government state situation. That would give you a certain amount of credits because you're registered with that board. That's called CPD points. I don't know if that's similar to what they do in the States, but is that sort of what this system would be going for, or is it more like we're just going on a system that's basic in terms of, okay, what I'm asking is the difference between the profession itself and its own registration boards versus the state being something that is fostering the services, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Am I making
We have two
sense?
certifications.
Okay.
One is the OCWTP certification. All workshops that have been approved in our system get OCWTP credit. Okay. Then we have the licensing board for social workers and counselors. And in order for you to get credit with that board, it has to go through a separate approval from a person who is reflecting the questions that board would be asking. And so we have someone in-house that does that for us.
Sort of like a parallel process.
Right. And every couple of years, the board reviews our stuff to make sure that we are following their protocols. And then there's also, sometimes we train attorneys, and they have their own licensing board too. And so we will also offer those credits to them also. Okay, let me get us back to the part. Again, developing outlines is a process, and in your world, you'll figure out what it is that are your non-negotiables and where you need to be flexible. And maybe what you do is you develop a plan for what you want to get to and where you're going to start, because you don't want to overwhelm your system. When I was explaining to Maria, when we started this outline thing, it looked very different from what it looks like today. We started very basically. We picked our non-negotiables. Our non-negotiables at the beginning were, we need to have a reference list. If someone asks us about the reliability of our training, we want to be able to show that there was some rigor to the development of this workshop. And a basic thing is a reference list. So that was one of our first non-negotiables. That was before we did all this other stuff. As we don't want you to give us an outline without a reference list. The other thing was your expertise. We want to be able to show that we just didn't pick you out from the streets and say, we want you to train this baby. You know, we know that you have expertise, and this is how we know that. Which brings me to another handout that I was wanting us to look at. And it's called Criteria for Determining Trainer, Coach, Facilitator Expertise. It looks like this. It's in your packet that is stapled. And I'm sorry, I should have done a better job putting them in an orderly fashion. But it looks like this.
Oh,
And whoever finds it first, let us know so we can know where to find it.
It's in this one.
Okay, it's right behind the trainer competencies.
Yeah, that's what. Right. Thanks.
You got behind the trainer competencies. The trainer competencies are distinctive because they have that brown strip on them. So right behind it is criteria for determining trainer, coach, facilitator, or trainer, facilitator. What do they call it? Trainer, coach, facilitator, expertise. You know, all of us have our own opinion about what expertise is. And that's what we're finding in our system is like, okay, we say we want expertise, but what you think is expert, this person thinks differently. So we need to come together with what it is going to be for our system. You know, what are we going to consider expert? So we got a group together and we developed some things that are important to us that for us speak to expertise. And so take a few moments to look at this, see what y'all think. Well, I'm looking for setting it up. So, you know, for us, experience was very important. Experience in what you're training was very important. We think that if someone hasn't done the work, how can they say they have an expertise in the work? So if I wanted someone to train on engagement, for example, I would want someone who had worked in the field and was doing interviewing or was working with families and engagement and then had at least 5 years, you know, or maybe less if that's what you decide. But some experience doing the work, I think, is important, and it needs to be recent experience. I did foster care and adoption, you know, many years ago, like, you know, 20 years ago. And I haven't really been in that field for a while. So my expertise really is from that time period. And so much has happened since then that I need to be careful to call myself an expert because I haven't done it recently. So I would look at those things. If I have recent experience doing it or somehow have stayed connected to the field, then that gives me some room to say I have an expertise. But if I haven't done it in a long time, I haven't kept up with the field, I am no longer an expert. Doesn't mean I don't know foster parents or foster kids or adoptive parents, but I just don't know exactly what the research has done or practice has done since I was doing it. The kids are different, the families are different, and so I would need to do some catching up before I could call myself an expert again. So the other thing is education. I am not going to contact an engineer to come and train about engaging families, right? They can engage widgets, but they can't engage families. So, you know, I think education is very important, or some kind of training, you know, because we have foster parents that train for us that may not have a lot of education, but they've been educated in life.
Yeah.
You know, and they have a lot they can bring. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't want to in some way prepare them and add to their expertise by giving them some best practice information and doing some educating for them, because that's important also. We can only go so far by our experience. There needs to be some training. And that you keep up with what's happening in the field, that you keep up with the reading. I believe that our development doesn't end at any time. It's a lifelong journey. And so if someone is wanting to be an expert, they need to continue to grow and to be educated. They need to attend conferences. They need to read books. They need to see videos. They need to do whatever they can to make sure to stay current with what's out there in the field. In whatever situation that you're in, whatever that means in your world and in your context. And the other thing is that they're able to apply with their training to child welfare. They need to know enough about our field to be able to make the connections. If you have someone that is a psychologist and all of their work has been adults and they want to train about issues with children, well, there's a disconnect there. There is no expertise in that. So this is just something that we developed to kind of guide us so that we could kind of meet in the same place, because we were having a hard time with that determination and our differing opinions about what expertise was. It's very nebulous. I mean, it's not a concrete thing. You can't just sit there with a checklist and say, okay, you're an expert because you met all these checklists. It really takes a lot of you thinking and strategizing what that means for you. What are some thoughts you have about
I think this is a very good starting place. But I think, I mean, personally, I wish I could see the role of interview. Do you read between the lines, or do you kind of like the tricky psychological questions? They just ask you, seems random, like they have. So I don't know if you apply that.
Right. The other thing is that, you know, we have all these things that we do, but we also observe workshops. So, you know, you can write anything, right? Just like you can say anything. But the important part is what is coming out in the workshop. And so we observe workshops, especially new workshops, to ensure that that they are of quality and that they're meeting the needs of the participants. And that becomes a challenge for us sometimes because we have so many workshops going all the time, and we have a lot of other things that we have to do also. So, it might be that you don't observe a total workshop, but some of the workshop, if you're concerned about it, you may stay a little longer, but if you find that, it's doing what it needs to be doing, then you move on. But that really is the only way you know if the workshop really is working, is to observe it. The other thing is evaluations. Having evaluations from participants, it's amazing the things that you can learn about what happened in a workshop. Sometimes it's by word of mouth. Your participants will tell you. You have to be careful though with that one, because there's very biased opinions that happen, maybe because they like the trainer, or because the trainer was very charismatic, or because the trainer was very boring. Because sometimes we have trainers that have the content down, but their presentation is like, oh my gosh. Yes. So you have to just use different tools to figure out, what it is that is happening in the workshops. But this is something I thought might be helpful to you as you're looking at that.
Sorry, can I ask, because you know our situation at home, how does it, let's say you want to teach trauma competence, what kind of a trainer would you be comfortable using this kind of criteria? And that knowledge, how can we?
All right, you have to do the best you can do. We understand, and our experience in working in 32 different countries is that sometimes it's very difficult to get the foundational knowledge and expertise that we would like to have when we select a trainer to do a particular topic. So you're going to have to make those decisions. What is the standard that you can work from within the culture and within the realities that you have? In addition to that, recognizing not everybody can train everything. So you may look at this person has the potential, has some background in this, seem to have some of the skills and abilities that up here that are going to make a good trainer. They have the will to learn, and I can coach them. And then from that, and you've done this right in Zimbabwe, what you did, the 12 trainers you brought in and trained them broadly. Not every one of those trainers will be doing the training and what you trained them in. But you've chosen to, and what did they do? They trained with you. Right? They trained with you. So now you've done a training with them. You've got to see what they can do, how deep they were able to take the material, where you needed to kind of continue to coach them. You were there to step in to make sure that there was accuracy in the content, and were able to adjust where there might have been some interpretation that was done incorrectly. So as I was sharing before, it's quite likely that within the system that Dan just gave you, what you're going to see is that when the training and content is done, I'll say as the standardized core training and content is done, is that we already have a person who has this level of knowledge. All right, we've got a person bringing in. You're bringing in people with like that probably maybe will have this level of knowledge. But as we're looking at a person who comes in with this level of knowledge, we also know that that person's going to continue to grow. The expectation is the same from where you're coming from. So you bring them in here, they're not able to go real deep, they'll stay pretty on the surface of what the content might be. But then where I see you stepping in, is much what I was sharing a little bit earlier with Alex, and you were listening here, is that we have a responsibility to continue asking, what are you reading? How are you studying? How are you continuing to improve yourself? And also delivering them information that we find. So we find an article, we find a book, we find something that supports, and that we continue to do coaching for that purpose. Does that make sense, group? Yeah. And I mean, let's look at this. Here's our choice here. To look at this and be frustrated and do nothing because we don't have the foundation, or to do what we can where we are and move on. Let me tell you, early on in this state of Ohio, where we're looking at this, early on, in order to be a social worker in the state, essentially you had to have a heartbeat and a driver's license. Honestly, that is the truth, a heartbeat and a driver's license. And it would be nice if you said you like children. I mean, honestly, it's what it was. And so from there, we're at a place now that we have licensure, we've got standards, we've got expectations. That is a developmental process. So when we look at this, we have to recognize we didn't get here overnight. You're not going to get there overnight either. But you are setting the bar is what you're doing. And you're setting it within your realities. You're not compromising. But what you're doing is you're going to hold a standardization. You're going to step in and we'll look for standardization and quality control. And what's going to happen, this trainer that can go this deep with your help will be able to go this deep and go this deep. And let's be honest, you're going deeper too. Right. So you're getting information kind of the first time. So it is all okay. Yeah, we're on just to do nothing, and that's scary.
And you also have to consider the learning need of your participants, because if most of your participants are at a level of needing awareness, your training system needs to reflect that. And as they grow in that, that's why we talked about, or I think you all talked about the levels of learning.
Yes.
If you're in a world or a system where you're introducing all this, that's a different need than getting to the point where the depth of skill development. And that's where maybe what you do for some folks, for the general training need, it would be an awareness and knowledge. Maybe there are some that are ready for more skill, and you take that on a more individualized way. So that's part of the thinking in developing the system is, what are the needs? You create your system based on the needs of the people you're going to be training.
And the exciting thing about the systems here, Beth, and I'll just share this with you and just validate those who are here. As we've been working together over the course of time and looking at your training that you're doing in developing training systems, all of you have gone from point A to point like D or E, and you're continuing to grow. You can't ask a question you don't understand needs to be asked. But what's happened is as your enlightenment, as the process continues on, you've asked questions, you've made adjustments, you've made changes, you've challenged some of the status quo even. And said, no, we're not going to do it this way. We thought that was right, but now we know differently. And that is going to be the continuous journey. I mean, Beth Ann is giving you the bar. And let's go back to what Judy said on day one. We're going to throw this out at you. We're throwing this big piece out at you, but we're recognizing there's this big hole here. And we're looking at what is missing, what can we put in there, and what do we have in there as well that begins to help us to get from here up here. And that is a journey that we're still doing in Ohio too, and in Canada. We're not done. We're not done. Make sense? Be encouraged. We want you to experience the cognitive dissonance because that's where growth goes. But at the same time, be encouraged of what you're doing.
And embrace where you're at and the things that you can accomplish and the vision that you can have. I think that's what brings joy. Okay, so we're going on another hunting trip. We're going to be hunting for this. It's called Ohio Child Welfare Training Program Continuum of Learning Methods.
It's just one page.
One page, oh, good. So it's an easy one to find. I think someone was asking, Sarah was asking about gap sessions. This is where we're going to talk about that. As we've continued to develop our program, we determined that we needed to kind of diversify the way we determined, and that there was different ways to approach it to meet different needs. And again, looking at our constituents and the depths and the different depths of learning. And so we created this delivery methods continuum, and we have found it to be very effective for us. For many, many years, we had just workshops, okay? And in our workshops, we tried to make everything happen within the workshop. And this chart right here kind of gives you a more in-depth description about what each of it is, okay? So when we do a workshop is usually in person. We have a trainer that comes with an outline and presents the information. It's mostly done in person, and but sometimes now we're playing with the idea of outline, even though Maria and I were sharing our distaste of that. But I think it's helpful to do outline when you have a lot of distance and you can't get people in the same room. But it's for us not a big deal. At least, and that's a personal opinion. That's not a CWTP or IHS opinion. That's my opinion. anyway, so the workshops would be competency-based and based on the need. And we would take people from awareness, knowledge, and understanding, and a beginning level of application, some of them. And we still do a big chunk of our training is workshops. That's a big chunk of what we do. And it works really well. But then we decided, in order to really take people to skill level, we really need to create a place where they get to practice what they do, okay? Because if we sit in a room and do a workshop and we do case scenarios or maybe role plays, if you're imparting knowledge, it's hard to do it all in a 6-hour time period or a 3-hour time period. And so we started connecting learning labs to some of our workshops. And we especially did that with our core training, because we had a lot of people that really needed to learn a lot, but they also needed to practice because they needed to go out in the field confident with the skills that they had learned. And we know that in order to have that, we really need to be able to practice it in a place that feels safe and where we can make mistakes and kind of learn from them. And so learning labs have been very effective also. So a lot of times what they do is they'll have a workshop and then the next day they'll have the learning lab. And so it's the same material, but the application of it. And so the total focus of the day is practicing. They have different exercises that they do, role plays that they do, that are opportunities for them to continue to work on the skills that they learn so that they can gain confidence. It's kind of like a transfer of learning in, what do you call it, turbo engine.
On steroids.
Yeah, on
Steroids.
steroids, yeah. And so that has been very helpful. And we use that a lot. The other thing is the gap sessions, which I think are one of my favorite. And it's the guided application and practice. And gap sessions they don't have to happen like right after the training. But let's say you did a workshop with or without a learning lab, and you learn a skill. And your expectation is that they're going to go back to their jobs and they're going to implement what they learned. So in about 3 months, 6 months, we bring the group back and we just have a discussion. We don't have an outline to speak. We have competencies that we look at, general topics that we're going to talk about. And so the question then becomes, how have you implemented this? What have been your challenges? What has worked or hasn't worked for you? And it gives an opportunity for people in a group to talk about things that have worked for them, where they can learn from each other about things that have worked or have not worked. So there's no new material introduced. It's all a review of what they learned and what they've applied and what they've learned from the application part, issues that they had and ways that they can do it differently or better. And that has also been a very successful way of doing training. It takes a long time to feel confident about a new skill. And sometimes we throw people out there, we say, okay, we've taught you all this, now go forth and make it happen. But this gives us an opportunity to check in and see how things are going with people. That's what a gap session is. Then we have the coaching.
And when you have the gap sessions, is it usually with the same trainers or with
It can be with the same one, or it can be with someone different.
Okay.
The same thing with the learning labs. Even though we try, I think, because they know the group, we try to get the same trainer to do it. Sometimes it doesn't work. So gap sessions sometimes are the same trainer, or it could be someone else doing it. And sometimes it's a trainer to develop the gap session, like that isn't directly related to a specific workshop, but more the topic. And so it can be both ways. And then the other thing that we have started using is coaching. And I think that that's more to address individualized needs of people. Now, I think what we were talking about earlier, where we have people at different levels of knowledge and skill. Sometimes coaching is helpful if you have someone that has a need that the rest of the group doesn't have, and that could benefit from one-on-one. And so then you hire someone that is an expert to work with that person on a particular area. Ruby, you do coaching, right?
I do a lot of coaching. Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit about how that has worked for you?
My coaching is primarily with supervisors and managers, and I've done coaching in large groups, and where I just finished a big coaching initiative with groups that were selected to be on track for becoming management. And so that was done in a large group. So it was really generalized activities where they were matched with a senior manager. And so expectations that they were to learn the organization, come back and report. So it's a little bit of a different kind of coaching. But the coaching that I've found most effective is the one-on-one coaching where there are some issues with particular supervisors or managers. So we'll be asked to coach, come in. The management will identify some of the goals that they have, some of the things that they'd like to see targeted. You create a coaching plan with the person that you're coaching, asking them what they see as their strengths, what you see as their areas to coach in. Hopefully they match with the manager set as well, and they generally always do because the manager generally is talking to them about this. You create a plan of what that's going to look like, things that they can work on. I get assignments. I continue to coach online after that, so I do a lot of checking in online because I travel so much. So it's easier for me rather than doing it back every week as well. So anyway, it's really individualized. It needs to have coach senior managers as well. And those are generally very confidential. They look a lot different because the senior management doesn't want anyone else in the organization to know what their problems are. So they're always real different. And that's created its own problems and its own benefits. I don't know really what you want to say.
I mean, I think it's been very beneficial.
Yeah.
Sometimes the coaching is related to a specific task. Like, for example, in Child Protective Services, they have their program is SACWIS, which is the program where caseworkers put all their information that is related to interviews with families, requirements for families. And sometimes they'll assign a coach to help them when their skills are a little limited with that particular program.
And almost all my coaching are soft skills. They're almost always intangible skills, building a relationship, engaging my staff, working through conflict, which is a little more tangible, but they're almost always intangible soft skills with managers and supervisors.
Is there a competency criteria to identify coach and give them some guidelines?
We do.
They use skill sets, and coaches will, when they become coaches, they'll assign them the skill sets that they're qualified to coach.
And they go through a kind of training.
Yes, there's a coaching training also that talks about what the requirements are and the responsibility as a coach is. Because that's very individualized, very different than the training.
And can you, I think I might have gone. But I mean, when you get there, can you also tell us the pros and cons in mentoring and coaching? What's
What the difference?
You can answer.
Okay, okay.
Because I've seen in the we talk about.
Okay. Okay. Any more questions about workshops? Okay, because we're gonna move on. We're gonna move on to trainers now, and our processes for bringing trainers in, the requirements that they have, and how we make that happen.
You said you use mostly workshops?
We use mostly workshops. A great amount of our training is workshops. And we're using more and more gap sessions. And then a lot of our learning labs are attached more to our standardized trainings.
Is gap sessions more like supervisory function?
A supervisory function?
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's not a supervisory function in that supervisors don't train them and it's not performance based. It really is.
Supplementary.
It really is a safe place to talk about what's worked or not worked, or ideas for how to do things differently.
Kind of follow up.
Kind of what?
Follow up.
Yes, a
on
follow up.
application.
Yes, yeah. So it's usually not anyone tied to the agency. It's usually a trainer who is not related to the agency. So it's not a supervisory function, and neither is coaching. So in your packet, I think that Ruby told me you guys had already gotten this before, but we have competencies for our trainers. And I think that they're very helpful to helping us with the expectations that we have for them. And I put these in there for you just for your information. We're not gonna go over them, there's quite a few. But it also will give you some idea of our expectations and what they offer trainers. Okay, so our trainer recruitment is needs driven. We get hundreds of calls from people wanting to be trainers. It usually happens when people are looking for a job. They think that we're gonna hire someone as a full-time job. And it usually happens also when people maybe are retiring and are looking for something to do after they retire. But our recruitment is needs driven. So it's based on what our system needs, not what the trainer or prospective trainer needs. And we again are looking for people who have recently been in the field or are in the field. We're looking for people who are professionals in the related professions, or that have are at the universities that have expertise in a number of areas. And then we're looking for people with life experiences. You know, sometimes our foster parents are our best trainers. But again, we have to remember on expertise and what their expertise is. Sometimes we have trainers that come in, and once they come in, they want to train more than just what they came in as experts. They want to train other things that they don't have expertise. So we have to be careful and make sure that we keep people in the lanes. We prefer people that have, again, expert knowledge, that have prior training or coaching experiences is important if possible, but it doesn't like count you out if you've never trained. If you have content expertise, then we can help you with the training skills. So really the non-negotiable is the content expertise. And it really has to be someone that understands child protective services and supports the system that we have. Because we don't want trainers out there training things that are negative about what we're trying to promote. So we want to make sure that they believe in what we believe in, because they're going to be representing us. And we have had people before who have become our trainers that we've had to talk to because they had things that they said in the training environment that were contrary to what were our values and our beliefs. And that is important to remember. And it's not easy to become a trainer. So it's not like if you want to become a trainer, you're just going to call me tomorrow and I say, oh, sure, come and train. And so one of the things that the process does for us, it helps us to identify those people who are really committed to training and those that are not. Because if they're not committed, then you're going to have trouble with them from the get-go. They're the ones that are going to cause you the problems. So you want to weed them out, before you bring them in. So we have an approval process that helps us do that in certain ways. So there's a sheet that I put in there that is part of our trainer guidebook that is called Trainer Application and Approval Process. I just want you to find it. We'll be talking about it in a little bit. So we have 3 levels of trainers, and we talked about it a little bit earlier. And so I won't spend a lot of time. We have the standardized trainers. Those are the ones that train our curriculum. They are the ones that we have the highest demands for, highest expectations. Those are the ones that we really focus on having the expertise in the material, because they are going to be teaching or training the foundation of everything that we stand for. And so those are the ones that get the most, I guess, Scrutiny, thank you, from us. Standardized trainers. Standardized trainers can only be approved by IHS. They are the only trainers that we are the only ones that approve. And they have to go not only through the general trainer approval process, but they also have to go through the standardized trainer approval process, and which is pretty intensive to ensure that they not only, because there's people that maybe have been in the field 25 years. That doesn't mean that they do the work right, So even if they have the experience, they have to be good at the practice, not just part of the practice. And so they get a lot of training and they get a lot of scrutiny before they're approved by IHS. And then a lot of supervision, especially initially. A lot of observation, a lot of interaction with the curriculum developers to ensure that they're doing the best that they can. I know that we have recently started Nan, I don't know if y'all have met Nan Beor, but she recently has started a kind of like a gap session, I guess, for trainers who are having some issues with engagement in the classroom, or the following the material. And so she's gonna have like a little gap session with them to kind of talk about some of the skills that they can develop to help them be better trainers. So that we really focus a lot of attention on this group of people. Then we have specialized trainers. And specialized trainers have their expertise also in child welfare. And so a lot of the topics that they teach are an extension of what the core training was, or things that are directly related to practice. And those are recruited and brought in not only by IHS, but also by RTCs. And a lot of times RTCs are the best recruiters because they're out in the field. They're out in the regions. They know who the professionals are and the experts. And so they're able to do some really good recruiting of trainers, and they bring them in. Content experts, a lot of times our related trainers start out coming as guest trainers, maybe at a conference. Okay.
Creepy.
And so they have expertise in their field. That's how we get a lot of our like medical personnel and our psychologists. It's really, we've seen them in conferences, we've talked to them, interacted with them, and then we recruit them to come in and train for our system. So we have different levels of trainers. See, there's this purple one, purple magazine, a purple paper called Approval Requirements by Trainer Category. It's a good table to show you kind of some of the requirements that we have. Looks like this.
Page number 1.
Because our process is so rigorous, we have different levels of training. We have some trainers that do different things. For example, an approved trainer that is non-standardized is in the first column. They submit an application, they submit their resume, they have an in-depth interview, and they have training of trainers that they have to attend. Okay, so let's say someone contacts us, or we approach someone and we want them to be a trainer. The first step is we send them some information about our system so they know what our system is and what our requirements are going to be. We have a prospective trainer guide, it's called, that we give them. We also have a little 3-hour workshop that we call So You Want to Be a Trainer. That kind of in a nutshell gives them information so that they can make the decision that they want to continue to pursue. Where we talk about what our system is, what our expectations are, what we're going to pay, those kinds of things, so that by the time they commit, they know what they're getting into and the rigor of it. And so that's a good way to weed people out. Because if they go in there and they see what you're going to ask them to do, and it's more than they can offer, then you're not wasting their time and your time. So once they come in, they decide to do it. They fill out an application. I think I might have put an application in here. Packet, if not, I think Ruby has an application in the packet, don't you, Ruby?
I did, I put one in there.
And so anyway, they fill out an application, and really the application for us helps us know what their expertise are, what their experiences are, what they think about things before we do the interview. Because then we have an interview also that we do. So they give us the application, and they have 3 letters of recommendation from people who know them professionally. Okay, and then their resume is important because then we know what their experience is. Those are things that are the very beginning of the approval process before we'll even move on to other things. Okay, once we receive those things, then they are required to go to 3 training of trainers. One of them is called Stand Up and Take Charge of the Learning Environment. It used to be called Presentation Skills, which I like that name much better. This one is enough. So I think sometimes I rebel and I call it presentation skills, but it really is about developing the skills to train, to present. It's you know how to manage an audience, how to deal with difficult participants, how to carry yourself in a professional way as a trainer, those kinds of things. It's a 2-day training that they attend. Again, that training, they're not paid to go. It's part of the process of getting approval. And it's a requirement, and they cannot move forward until they've taken presentation skills. And then the next one that they are required to take is, and close and dear to my heart, addressing diversity issues in your training. Because what we're finding was that in that outline that I showed you where it says, how do you address diversity issues? People were really lost about what to put there. Or were putting things that really were not applicable. And we determined that we used to have a culture and diversity training of trainers that was 4-day training. And it was specific about culture and diversity, but not necessarily the application part of it. So we developed a workshop that is specific to the application of diversity in your learning environment. So we give people tools and skills, ideas for how to integrate diversity issues into their workshop outlines. It's a 1-day training, and we take them through the process of how you would do, of what that might look like. And then in the afternoon, they can use their own topic to integrate diversity issues. And we have found that to be very useful to newer trainers who are attending that. And so that's another one that's required. Presentation skills, or the stand up and take charge of the learning environment. That workshop is required before you can get approved, okay? The diversity training, even though it's required, you have 1 year to take it. So you can be approved before you take that one. One that isn't required, but we highly recommend it, especially to those folks who are developing their own workshops, is curriculum development. Because we think that you have to have skills to develop a workshop, and that you don't necessarily come in knowing what those skills are. And it's a good training to help them, makes it a lot easier when they're developing their workshops. It's not at this time required. We would like to make it required, but there's a limit to what you can require of people who are contract people. So,
Is that the Katniss taught?
I'm sorry?
Katniss taught?
Katniss is a TOT that we now require because the state required us to require it. And so now all of our trainers have to do that, and it's the assessment tool that the state uses. They want it integrated into all training. And so all our trainers are required to take that within the first year that they're approved. Before we move on, lunchtime. I have to stop talking. So we'll continue after lunch.
Thank you, guys. It's wonderful. I know, name the